Something, yeah, similar to that.
But it's a little more sophisticated, obviously. It's a finer detail.
Right, exactly. And it follows your pencil lines, and it's just like drawing on paper. No difference. You don't even have to look at the screen.
Which do you prefer working with? Entering with the mouse, with the points, or drawing?
Well, they sort of both have different applications. One of the things that we're working on is a comic book, and of course it's a lot more natural to draw with the pressure-sensitive drawing tablet.
You're doing a comic book on a computer?
We're doing a comic book on a computer.
Okay, tell me about Tony Bravado.
Okay, Tony Bravado is the comic book that we're working on. It's a 32-page black and white comic, colored covers, and we're rendering the entire comic on this computer, the Amiga computer system. And what we're doing, I'm penciling in the drawings onto paper, and then my partner, Gord Davis, is basically transferring them into the computer, so he's acting as an inker, an electronic inker. Once we have the images in the computer, then we can manipulate them into panels, we can work out our layouts.
And you can just chop the panels around and until you get a layout you like.
That we like, and add the word balloons and so on. And the nice thing is that once it's all done, you know, if the editor, writer, so on wants changes, it's very easy to make a change at that point without having to redraw everything.
It's not written in stone, it's not even written on paper, it's a bunch of ones and zeros in a computer somewhere. It's binary code, and it's easy to change. Back to the Future Part 2 takes place in the past, in the future, now, and in an alternate now, which means we get to see scenes that we saw in the first movie, Back to the Future Part 1, but now we see them from a new angle. The watcher is being watched. Get it? Me either. It's always been popular. One comic that asks the question, what if, is the comic What If? Every month, they take pivotal moments in the Marvel Universe and show a different version of what might have been. Commander Rick's personal favorite was written and drawn by Frank Miller in What If number 35. What if Bullseye hadn't killed Elektra? After all, Elektra's death has haunted Daredevil ever since. In the What If story, Elektra lives, and Daredevil hangs up his tights to go live with her on a Greek island. That means the end of Daredevil. So, Elektra's death was bad, but this would have been worse. The theme of What If comics is that good will always find a way to triumph over evil. And it's also a chance for Marvel to say, yes, we know you're upset with the way the story turned out, but this would have been worse, so leave it to us, we know what we're doing, and stop complaining. Speaking of altered universes, my copy of issue 12 of Doctor Strange arrived via priority post, and I spent 2 hours admiring the new avant-garde artwork before I realized my copy had been misprinted. Now, if this were a stamp or a coin or even Disney memorabilia, this would be worth a fortune. But because it's a comic, it's just carpeting for your birdcage. If this happens to you, and it will, because comic book publishers aren't infallible, despite what they tell their writers and artists, then take the comic book back to the store, and they should give you a new comic. If they don't, tell them the commander sent you. If they still don't, there's a lot of science fiction novels and stories about alternate realities. In a lot of them, time travel is involved. But in some alternate reality stories, they just take Earth history and branch off suddenly at one point. For example, Pavan by Keith Roberts. It asks, what if Elizabeth I was assassinated and Britain became Roman Catholic under the Spanish Empire? The church suppresses progress. By the 20th century, there are a few steam-powered trains, but no phones, no computers, no atomic power. But there's a good side, too. No phones, no computers, and no atomic power. We don't end up developing nuclear weapons before we're morally and ethically advanced enough to deal with them. West of Eden by Harry Harrison asks, what if dinosaurs had survived and developed high intelligence and then encountered a strange new breed of mammal that walked upright? And what if the two species decided to set their differences by a game of touch football? Is time travel possible? No? Then how does Commander Rick know about a book that hasn't even been written yet? Orson Scott Card, author of Ender's Game about war between humans and an alien race, and the sequel, Speaker for the Dead, is working on part 3. But his next project after that will be a time travel alternate universe story called The Redemption of Columbus. People from the future decide to change the past once. They pick the one event in history that caused the most pain and suffering, Columbus discovering America. I predict the softcover book will be released in 1992 to commemorate the 500th anniversary of Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Clever marketing. Okay, let's move from science fiction to science fact. Jay Ingram is the host of CBC Radio's Quirks and Quarks. He's just written a book called The Science of Everyday Life, and hey, he's a heck of a human being in his own right. Jay? Come on in, Jay. Hello, Jay.
Can you hear me? Rick.
I can hear you. I can't.
Commander.
Ah, there you go. Since we are talking about gravity, in the movie Back to the Future Part 2, they talk about levitation, skateboards and cars that can float. Is that possible in the future?
Well, it depends what you call levitation. Certainly cars that float is a a real possibility, and you can do it on a very small scale in the lab now with these materials called superconductors, because when a current is passed through them, their resistance to electricity becomes zero, and you can perform neat little tricks with making superconducting magnets that can float things. The thing is this ever going to be done on any sort of large scale? Everybody got very excited 2 years ago when so-called room temperature superconductors were discovered.
But they weren't even room temperature. They were still at liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what's a few degrees when you're talking science? Liquid nitrogen, room temperature. They were aiming for room temperature.
Well, how high did they get?
Well, it's not even a question of how high they got. I think the latest reports are around 0 Celsius, or maybe even a bit higher. Oh. But do these things really work in any situations other than very careful experimental ones? Are they materials that you're going to be able to make into anything? I would say the prognosis is much more pessimistic now than it was 2 years ago.
So is time travel, alternate reality story a new phenomena or not? The man to ask is Robert Sawyer. Robert, come on in, Robert.
Hi, Rick.
Hello, Robert.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm, stuck in a tin can, starving to death, breathing stale air.
Things are looking up then, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. There's been a lot of time travel and alternate reality stories over the years, right? Is there a revival going on right now because of Back to the Future and so on?
Well, it's exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. Back to the Future is about time travel, and it's about changing things in the past and consequences that ripple forward into the future. Whenever a blockbuster science fiction film comes along, we see immediately a flurry of stories in science fiction that deal with the same themes. People say, hey, that's
Battlestar Galactica, for example.
Battlestar Galactica was a spin-off,
Star Wars.
Figuratively, from Star Wars. And we saw a lot of the ancient knighthood sort of stories after Star Wars came out. So absolutely, Back to the Future is the culprit. The idea is not new at all. Back to the Future did not invent the idea.
Where did it start?
I don't know who was the first one to write a time travel story in which somebody goes back in time and some trivial thing that they do has big consequences that change the future.
Right.
But certainly the most famous one is the short story A Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury, which was published in Playboy about 30 years ago.
What's the synopsis of that?
Very simple story. There's a company that specializes in safaris. People want to go back in time and hunt dinosaurs. The one rule is you have to stay on these special elevated paths that float above the ground, because were you to step off, don't step on a blade of grass,
step on the grass, that's right.
Step on a bug, do whatever, there would be repercussions from that seemingly trivial event that would completely remake your world by the time you got back. And it's of course a punchline short story. One of the guys on the safari does step off, steps on a bug, and when he gets back, he finds out that society is completely remade. The English language has changed. Words are different.
Right, he steps off and it looks right, and then all of a sudden he can't read the words. I remember that.
Exactly. It's a great story.
Great story.
And everybody, as in everything, there's one great story and everybody looks for a different take on it, a different way of twisting it. And that's what we're seeing today. And Back to the Future is the catalyst for bringing us a lot of that kind of story right now.
Now, I know there's a lot of people who don't think Back to the Future Part 2 is real science fiction any more than Cheese Whiz is real food. In fact, yeah, there's a school of thought that says, with the exception of maybe 2001 and one or two other films, science fiction is really only written prose. The rest is sci-fi. But let's face it, Back to the Future Part 2, whether it's sci-fi or science fiction, it's in there somewhere, and it's funny. The Future Part 2 is a Steven Spielberg film, and Back to the Future Part 2 is full of little in-jokes. You know, when you live in a tin can all day and all you can do is watch TV, eat canned food, and listen to canned laughter, you really appreciate mail. Let's go to Commander Rick's electronic mailbag. J.D. LaFranche of Oshawa writes, I like the way you tie in current issues with movies and comics. When you did the show on the arms race, you didn't mention the 12-issue miniseries The Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, which dealt majorly with nuclear arms. What's the story? Well, the story, J.D., is that there's like 600 comics published a month. Comics have been published since, well, 1930s, not to mention the hundreds, well, thousands of science fiction books that come out every year. My batteries last 20, 25 minutes, and then I keep getting jammed by ground control and TVO, so that's the problem. I got a whole care package of stuff from Chris Hamilton in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Chris writes, I'm happier than a pig and something that pigs may be happy in to see your show. I particularly loved your episode with comic conventions, clips, and tips. You seem to also stress the independent comics too. Yeah, well, we do. Which I found most appealing. I myself am an independent publisher. Chris even sent me a picture he drew of me and a chain letter that warns that if I break it, it'll bring on the apocalypse and the rise of devil worship. Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick on board Reality One. Happy holidays. Well, all of you down there can afford to take some time off. The commander never rests. 24 hours a day, I'm spreading the gospel about science fiction and comic books, trying to convert the mouth breathers to the cause. We have to make enough people realize that science fiction and comic books are more than just entertainment. They're more than an art form. They are the only true medium for the intelligent discussion of the life and death issues facing humankind. I need a holiday. What is a holiday anyway? A break from reality? What's reality? You've got dull, stultified communism producing a leader like Mikhail Gorbachev, aggressive, dynamic, and then you got aggressive, dynamic capitalism producing a dull, stultified George Bush. Reality? There is no such thing, reality. Reality's taking a vacation. They're all out to lunch. First, there's Communion, Whitley Strieber's story of alien abduction. The book was published as non-fiction. Luckily, the movie is not being sold as a documentary or even a recreation.
What are you doing? What the heck are you doing? Flying the roof off so Prancer can jump out.
Prancer is the 80s version of Miracle on 34th Street. It's the story of a little girl who believes in her heart that this reindeer really is Prancer, Santa's Prancer. It's a really nice story, a touching story about childlike faith in the unbelievable. Kind of like Communion.
Come on, Prancer. Come on.
There, from director Jean-Jacques Annaud, the man who gave us Quest for Fire. Now this is film, telling stories with pictures, not words. I guess I should shut up then.
You have natural rhythm. Unusual for a woman.
I'm getting dizzy.
Everything is...
All Dogs Go to Heaven is the latest film from Don Bluth. Don Bluth left Disney years ago to strike out on his own to get some creative freedom and to produce his own movies. He did with American Tail, The Secret of Nim.
The thrill, I've never been there, but someday I will. Adventure and danger, love from a stranger. Let me be surprised.
Where are we? When are we?
We're descending toward Hill Valley, California at 4:29 p.m. on Wednesday, October 21st, 2015.
2015? You mean we're in the future?
And the mega monster hit of the holidays is Back to the Future Part 2. Started out as a single film, and over time it has traveled and turned into a trilogy. Everyone is seeing this film, except me.
Here's our exit.
The Little Mermaid.
I want to be where the people are.
The Little Mermaid is an animated release from Disney.
Dancing up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun.
It's the story of Ariel, a beautiful young mermaid who wants to become human.
He's very handsome, isn't he?
I don't know, he looks kind of hairy and slobbery to me.
Not that one, the other one.
A holiday tradition in comics was the annual Christmas story every December in The Spirit. The Spirit was Will Eisner's low-key hero, Denny Colt, whose trademark was a small blue mask and no socks. The Spirit lived in Wildwood Cemetery. Was he alive or was he, you know, dead? The plots were funny or sad, like short stories by O. Henry. The Spirit appeared in newspapers every Sunday all through the 40s and 50s, each week a full 8-page story. To churn out that much artwork, Eisner developed a team of people working almost on an assembly line. Some of the people who worked on The Spirit include Lou Fine and Jules Pfeiffer. If you like The Spirit, and it's hard not to, they're currently being reprinted in chronological order by Kitchen Sink Comics. Way to go, Kitchen Sink! Rob Salem is the host of a syndicated radio show called Video Guy. He's also a heck of a human being in his own right. I'm going to talk to him.
We've all heard about that B word. That, you know, that guy with the black thing.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. I went down to the dry cleaner the other day and found a rack of Batman cassettes there. So if you want to buy that, it's certainly available.
Okay.
There's a new restored...
Is there a difference between the Batman as the movie in the theater and Batman in the video?
Yes, funny you should mention that. It's much clearer on video. They apparently cut it from a new internegative. My problem with the film, other than that I didn't like it, was that it was much too dark.
Right.
It was very hard to see what was going on. Kind of like watching mud on the big screen. But on the small screen, they've cut it from a new internegative. Burton apparently oversaw the film-to-video transfer. And
that's Tim Burton, the director? See?
Yes. Good. And anyway, and bumped it up to the point where, in fact, it's so bright that if you have a really sensitive VCR, it may cause interference. But I can actually see the film now. I still think Keaton looks like a Pez dispenser, but other than that, it works very well. So there's one. There's one gift. The making of the Wizard of Oz, I should mention first. That's a new restored version with extra footage added on the end, and also cut from a new negative, so it's Technicolor. It's quite fabulous. There's the making of Gone with the Wind.
I heard Ted Turner's going to actually colorize the first 20 minutes of the film. Is that happening?
Well, you know, it's funny you should mention that, because what he did do was, in fact, colorize it. It was originally released in sepia, which is that sort of beige and brown effect. And it works much better. It gives it a much warmer feeling. So this is restored to that color.
I'm sorry, Ted, I take it back then.
There's also a really good documentary about the making of Gone with the Wind that is just fabulous Hollywood history.
And that's included with the tape, or is it separate?
No, it's separate. You can also, they've also reissued Gone with the Wind, because it's the 50th anniversary for both of these films, for Wizard and Gone with the Wind. But the making of tape is just a really good documentary. For example, did you know that the gates of Georgia, when they're burning down, that huge big scene or his big building, those are in fact the same gates that King Kong had gone through in King Kong?
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, well, I thought
Sure, I knew that.
I thought you might.
What else do you recommend?
What else? Well, Roger Rabbit, again, you know, that's for sale. And it's quite fun on video because you can actually freeze frame and see how they did everything.
Oh, that's neat.
And Cosmos is now available on video cassette for like $20 an episode. It's the Carl Sagan series.
Yeah, apparently they're selling billions and billions of them.
That was pure setup. I just wanted to hear your Carl Sagan.
Somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
You try it, you try it.
Billions and billions.
Superheroes rarely take vacations, but when they do, it's a case of where heroes go, troubles follow. X-Men, issue 98, opens with the X-Men skating on Rockefeller Center, an American icon. The skating gives way to action as they begin the Xavier's Dream epic. In X-Men issue 143, the team jet off for a holiday, but Kitty Pryde stays behind and ends up single-handedly taking on an alien who looks suspiciously like the alien from Alien. In Daredevil Born Again, Matt Murdock stops some villains who mugged Santa and have stolen Santa's costume. Is nothing sacred? Have you noticed that none of the comic book adventures take place on Yom Kippur or Hanukkah? It's strange because a lot of the comic book creators are Jewish. Stan Lee, Will Eisner, Harvey Kurtzman, Mort Weitzinger, Jack Kirby. There's no Jewish superheroes. And don't tell me it's because their mothers wanted them to become doctors. They say when you buy a gift, it's not the price, it's the thought that counts. But if the price is under $3, it's kind of a cheesy thought. What do you get somebody who's a comic book collector? Comics only cost, well, $2, $3, $4. Well, luckily there's an answer. Graphic novels, hardcover comic books. They're fancy, they're big, and they're expensive. Let's talk to the owner of The Beguiling, a comic book store in Toronto, Steve Solmo. Steve? Hello, Steve. Hang on. There. Ooh, hang on. Almost got you. Gotcha. Aha. Steve, graphic novels. They make a good gift?
Yes, indeed they do, Rick.
Okay, what do you recommend?
Well, I've got a few expensive items that I'm sure everybody would want to give a friend, a mate, or even their grandmother. There's a book called A Contract with God by Will Eisner, a book of vignettes dealing with people's relationships with their maker.
Oh, really?
Little Nemo in Slumberland, which is Winsor McKay's classic comic strip, which deals with our nocturnal image-making desires. There's also Fires from Lorenzo Mattotti, a European artist.
I haven't seen that.
Well, it's a wonderful expressionist nightmare, which I'm sure you'd very much enjoy. There's also Indian Summer, also from Europe, which many people have compared to Nathaniel Hawthorne. I haven't read Hawthorne, so I wouldn't know, but that's what they say.
Oh, okay. And they being the vast literary something or other.
The vast many, yes.
Yeah.
And finally, Art Spiegelman's avant-garde anthology, Raw, which should be on everyone's bookshelf.
Yeah, including grandmas?
Including grannies.
Okay. That way you get your inheritance sooner.
Probably.
Now, how much does a graphic novel cost?
Well, they range in price. The Little Nemo book costs $38.95.
Okay.
Some of them are even $7 or $8. It just depends on how good looking they are, what kind of jacket, sleeve, hardcover, softcover, many different variables involved.
But they're really a value. I mean, you get a ton of comic for your money there.
Well, it's actually more quality than quantity that we're really looking at here. Some of them are just designed or packaged for something that's going to last. Comics have always been, for the most part, you know, printed on newsprint and something that could be used in your fireplace after you've read them. But these books are designed to last, you know, along with the Bible and the Quran.
Now, these are also the best of in a lot of cases, right? You're sort of getting really classic comics here.
Some of these books are considered definitely seminal works in the medium, and you know, should be in everyone's library.
What the hell are those things? One science fiction writer who's written more than once about holidays is Robert A. Heinlein. His 1951 story, Between Planets, finds Don Harvey going home from college on Earth to spend the holidays with his family on Mars. Because he was born in orbit between Luna and Ganymede, Don has no allegiance to any planet, which means when a colonial war breaks out between Earth, Mars, and Venus, everyone treats him as an enemy. His holiday is hijacked, and Don ends up getting involved in the war. Tunnel in the Sky follows another college student who has one final exam before he goes on holidays. He's a senior at a school for space colonists. The final exam is a sort of an interstellar field trip. The students are scattered onto a strange planet armed only with what they can carry. To pass, they must survive by their wits for 2 weeks. Only something goes wrong, and weeks turn into years. Another Heinlein holiday story is Pog Kane of Mars, following the adventures of a teenage girl on vacation. All these books follow teenagers coming of age, and all were written for the juvenile market. In the book Robert A. Heinlein, America is Science Fiction by Bruce Franklin, Heinlein says, "My books for boys differ only slightly from my books for adults. The books for boys are somewhat harder to read because younger readers relish tough ideas they have to chew and don't mind big words. And the boys' books are slightly limited by taboos and conventions imposed by their elders. Ain't it the truth?" Well, before any of you juveniles start feeling sorry for yourself, remember that the adults' world is limited by way more taboos that they impose on each other because they have to be grown up. Some of you may be surprised that there's a whole book about Heinlein. Actually, there's quite a few books about the Dean of Science Fiction. Just take a look at a few here. The man even has Cole's notes. Hey, that's respectability.
I think there are 5 excellent gift items. Only 4 of them are books.
Okay.
Every year, Gardner Dozois, American editor, brings out a collection called The Year's Best Science Fiction. Massive thing, 250,000 years. Best short stories from the magazines from the previous year. Grab that one and you're guaranteed, you know, literally days of excellent reading.
Okay.
There's a new book out and about, I guess, about 18 months ago called The New Encyclopedia of Science Fiction.
Oh, right.
Edited by James Gunn.
Gunn.
Your trivia buff is going to love it. Your science fiction buff is going to love it. Lots of stuff on science fiction literature and on movies. The third thing I'd recommend, a novel called Barking Dogs. You can get it in hardcover, you can get it in paperback. Terrence M. Green wrote it. It's a futuristic police thriller set in Toronto in 1999. If you like cop stories, if you like science fiction, if you like good people stories, if you like thrillers, this is a great book. It's got it ends with I don't tell you how it ends, but the final, or near the end, there's a laser battle on Toronto's Center Island. I mean, it's great stuff. The final one is not science fiction, it's science fact. It's The Dinosaurs of North America, An Odyssey Through Time.
This is that giant...
It's a giant...
card table book?
Yeah, exactly.
Legs
Coffee
included,
table book from University of Toronto Press by Dr. Dale A. Russell, who's the curator of fossil vertebrates at the National Museum of Natural Sciences in Ottawa. Science fiction is all about other worlds and strange creatures.
Right.
Russell has written a book here that incredibly evocatively brings to life a completely alien world full of incredible creatures, except that that alien world is our world of 65 million years ago, and that the creatures are those creatures that we go to see in the dinosaur halls at museums. Incredibly interesting book.
It's
great
interesting
stuff.
because
and an SFN will love it.
Right, and one thing about Canada that people don't realize is it is really, more than Africa even, the dinosaur capital of the world. The movie RoboCop opened at a high-tech company where a new computerized robot policeman goes haywire and machine guns an executive to death, blood, guts everywhere. Meanwhile, a cop who's out on patrol is cornered by about 8 bad guys. They shoot him so many times his arms and legs are shot right off. His female partner is thrown off a catwalk, lands on some steel bars, and is left to die. The company gets hold of this guy, the shot-up guy, saws off his one good arm and turns him into a cyborg, a robot policeman. RoboCop is born. RoboCop goes out, shoots a knife-wielding psycho right in the crotch. He falls down, shoots another guy through the head. Then another guy falls into toxic waste, gets hit by a truck head-on and explodes into 1,000 pieces. The executive in charge of the RoboCop project is cornered by a hitman while he's sniffing cocaine with some hookers in his house. The hitman shoots him in both legs so he can't crawl away, and then puts a hand grenade down. He's blown to pieces. Several other people get shot up, including the female partner, again machine-gunned, her arm shot off. The movie ends with about 30 people dead, maimed, horribly shot up. And now it's all available as a toy. RoboCop toys. I'm sorry, this is a toy? Tell you what, if you want to get a toy for someone, get them a chemistry set. Get them a book. What the heck, let's talk to some people and find out what else is available. What's a 5-letter word for one who weeps for all mankind? The answer? Baka. It's from Frank Herbert's book, Dune. Baka is also the name of a bookstore, Baka Books, and the owner is John Rose. Let's talk to him. John? John? Hello, John? I think I'm getting... John, is that you?
There we are.
Hello, John. How are you doing?
Hello.
What are your hottest selling books and titles of this holiday season?
Ooh, it's a tough question. Everything's selling a little bit. There's a parallel world story by Robert Charles Wilson. He's a Canadian author called Gypsies. The third the third cyberpunk novel by another Canadian author, William Gibson, Mona Lisa Overdrive, came out.
What's the story in that? Because unfortunately, Priority Post doesn't go this high, and I don't even have a mailbox. What's briefly the story for Mona Lisa Overdrive?
That one's a tough one to put into a few words, but it ends a 3-book series about the interaction between non-human and human intelligences. Intelligences?
Intelligenci?
That too.
Intelligence is something.
Yeah.
Brains.
Yep.
Brains, that's what we're talking about here. That's been an ongoing theme with William Gibson. Is he abandoning that now, or?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything new that he's doing. He's done a book of short stories as well as the 3 novels, and all of them have focused on the same theme. If human beings can invent an intelligence, what's it going to be like? What's going to separate it from humans? And he's played with that and stuck on that for the 4 books. Robert Charles Wilson is essentially what one would call a humanist writer. He writes about people rather than about the technology of the future. Usually they're people caught up in some aspect of future life, but he's focusing on the character. He's focusing on developing the human side of the book rather than just the techno-gizmos.
Are they set far in the future, near future, or present?
He tends to go near future. He's setting it about 10 years down the line.
Can you give me a sample, as we would say in grade 9, a plot outline of one of his stories?
A précis.
Yes, a précis, thank you.
Well, he's got a new one called Gypsies, about people who are able to project themselves into alternate realities. It's an extremely good book, but it focuses on the relationship that develops in a family of what everyone else would consider to be mutants.
If you want to know what the immediate future has in store, check out the book Future Stuff by Malcolm Abrams and Harriet Bernstein. The book catalogs over 250 gadgets and products that will be available by the year 2000, from a musical instrument you play with your brainwaves to satellite navigation systems for your car. And if you ever wanted a car that had overdrive, and I mean overdrive, then you'll want to buy the Moeller 400. A car, helicopter, and plane all in one, and just as expensive at $100,000. It'll be available by 1991. Supercar! Or start with a standard Honda CRX, clip-on wings and a tail, and you've got Aerocar. It's actually got FAA approval as an experimental aircraft. Tired of getting up to change channels? By 1995, your TV may come walking over to you. Brian Elliott, a design student in California, has come up with a walking TV. Great. When you're sleeping, it even walks around patrolling your house. If the ski toes are out of service, fear not, friends. Pull your ripcord, yell Geronimo, and go uphill skiing. It works in winds as slow as 8 kilometers an hour, and it's been tested at winds of 50 miles an hour. What's this? A bunch of college students strap lawn jockeys on Dobermans? No, these are robo-jockeys for indoor horse racing. Yes, that's right, indoor horse racing. The horses are about half the